We're here, Moats. Welcome to X's and Joe's, a podcast dedicated to decoding the winning formula in college basketball.
And I'm Mike Wiemuth, welcoming you to episode 36, One Fleeting Moment, Why the Big Ten Hasn't Hung a Banner Since the Clinton Administration. Recorded on the afternoon of Tuesday, August 4th, 2025. So, Robert, I know we're slowly checking off the full roster of Back Home Network stars to come on the show, but I do feel this one is just a tad overdue in our schedule.
I see Cast at the bottom of Crimson Cast, or we see Scott is here.
Hey guys, yeah, Crimson Cast without the hair. The no Galen flowing locks. I'm here. It's great to be here. It's been way overdue, and yes, I like the cast, the Back Home cast of stars. It's like a '70s, like the Battle of the Network stars. Like we're gonna do tug of war now.
100-yard dash.
Yeah.
I'll volunteer if it's a Circus of Stars to be shot out of the cannon if we want to do that. I'll be more than happy to fill that role. Fire me right into Lake Monroe or something.
Exactly. Well, thanks, Scott Caulfield, for coming. And for fans, I guess, that have followed you for a while, Scott, and this is something we ask of everyone that comes on the show, maybe give us a little bit of a background on yourself that isn't obvious to the folks that have been following you for a while. Like, give us the origin story of Scott Caulfield.
Yeah, I'm a Cancer. I like long walks on the beach.
Exactly.
I'm married. Sorry, ladies. So I grew up mostly in Bloomington. Originally, I grew up in New York City, actually, until I was about 9 years old, and then made the very odd switch from New York City to Bloomington. But then stayed in Bloomington, went to high school there, Bloomington South. Although I think the area I lived right by campus. Like we were right by Forest Quad. I think it's now in North District. So I grew up going around to campus, kind of screwing around at the Union, walking around Dunn Meadow. Like, there's just like used to be an arcade down by the Village Pantry on like 3rd and Jordan I would go to. I was just a kid living in Bloomington. It's actually not a great place to grow up. I mean, it's great because it's like idyllic and small, but there's not a lot for high school kids. Like when you get to middle school, high school, it's like it is all geared toward college. Anyway, I went to IU, as everyone knows, met Galen, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But yeah, and for those who didn't know, I kind of bounced around after that. I lived in Houston for a couple of years. I taught middle school, coached basketball, then got into sales and real estate and lived in St. Louis. And then I've lived in north side of Indianapolis since 2009.
Lovely.
So you're telling me that you frequented the spaceport in Bloomington?
Oh God, yes. I went to the spaceport all the time. Yeah, my dad and I used to ride our bikes down to spaceport and then go to like the Penguin. Yes, the Penguin for ice cream afterwards. No, there was like middle high school. There was if you know 3rd and Jordan, there was a village, still a Village Pantry there. I think it's a coffee shop now. It used to be Hinkle's, had a spot on the left. There was like this one vacant spot that a guy just put in like 10 video game machines, like 2 Street Fighters and NBA Jam. And my friends and I would go down there and just play the living heck out of that stuff.
Okay. Yeah, that's before that became the Papa John's.
Correct. Yeah, way before that. Or maybe Papa John's was there and it was like right to the left of it. It was a weird little setup. But no, went to Spaceport a ton. Love Spaceport. It's wild to think how valuable that space is in Bloomington now. That's like $1 million condo above there. And from like 1960 to 1994, it's like, we'll just have an arcade. And we'll just have an arcade right there on the corner next to IU. That's fine.
Kind of open. It was kind of, and again, it had a nice dumpy feel to it. I remember, Mike may remember this. It was a big controversy when they tore that down and put a Starbucks there. It was like, originally they put that Starbucks there. It was like, the end of the world as we know it. Here comes the meteorite. Get your canned goods in a bucket and head to the basement. It's over.
Sign of the times.
Yeah. Well, it's funny growing up in Bloomington, Galen and I's eras kind of overlap because I moved there in 86. I was there through college. I moved out in 2001, went to Houston. And then, I would come back. My dad was there while he lived, for a while. So I always come back. And I'm there a lot now for real estate and stuff. And, but Galen kind of moved back in like 05, 06, somewhere in that range. And then he's kind of picked up. So he knows way more about Bloomington than I do. Like my era is that era of like Spaceport and Racks and the College Mall and like the Wendy's. And it's like, I was never great with street names. So like when you're talking about like where stuff is. It's like, oh, I live near Forest Quad, and like there's a Noble Romans up there. Like now it's not like all of my reference points are this was that 20 years ago, but now it's not. Whereas Galen knows like the actual references, like, oh no, that's actually something there. Like he was mentioning the new restaurant. And this again, it's like it used to be an IGA. It's like, oh God, what's the place called? Anyway, it's where I used to go buy cigarettes before I was 16.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, Mike, that's the place we ate, wasn't it? Where you used to deliver those cigarettes that Scott bought.
It's the place. It's the place you guys had. I wasn't able to make it that Friday night when you guys had the dinner. The not that. But anyway, yeah.
The Elm or something like that.
Yes, that used to be an old IGA.
It was, yeah.
Like that. So that's perfect example of how I know Bloomington is like. What did it used to be in 1989?
Yeah.
Anyway,
there
you go.
Yeah.
And so, God, the state of Indiana is Mayberry with interstates. That's all there is to it. It just all kind of connects together. And before it was just one big small town with a soybean field or two.
Yeah.
So speaking of Mr. Clavio, I think that would be my follow-up question for you. Like, how did you and Galen actually meet? Like, what are the circumstances? I'm sure it's not, some like a candlelit dinner, but give us at least the backstory for your meeting.
That would be a fun, really fun. Like I just make up a complete fake backstory here and just sell it, and then like wait for Galen to say something. Or it's like, does Galen actually listen to the pod? Because if he doesn't, he may never hear about it. Like, yeah, Galen was shoplifting at Spaceport, and I caught him. No,
we can make an AI video out of it. It would be perfect for you.
Yeah. I mean, maybe this is. I could just be AI Scott for all you know. We both worked at WIUS. I'm not sure the exact first time we met, but we were both on the sports team at WIUS. Before it was WIUX. Again, everything for me is what it used to be, WIUS. So we started doing the sports stuff together at WIUS, and I was a year ahead of him. And then I think my junior year, I was like, we had just kind of become friends through that and talking, and we shared basketball tickets together. So it's like, hey, let's get our season basketball tickets together. So we got those, watched a lot of mid Bob Knight teams together. And then we worked our schedules my senior year where he and I both took, I don't know if you guys have talked about this, but Bob Knight used to teach a class called coaching basketball.
Oh, yes.
And he and I took that class together, which we almost should do a separate episode on that. There's so many stories we have from that. It ended up being a lot of Norm Ellenberger, like a lot of Norm doing the class, and Knight would show up like 3 different times, and then the rest of it was just Norm telling you stuff. We can save a lot of those stories for later, but I vividly remember the 2 stories, if you grant me this moment for the Knight stories.
Sure.
Because we all love Bob Knight here.
Oh, yeah.
It was during the summer, the end of summer, where McGuire and Sosa were having their home run battle. And McGuire had hit like a 65th or 66th home run at New York against the Mets. And like 3 days later, we had our class, and we come in, and there's like 2 just red cleats just on the desk. And Knight just starts talking about how he's friends with Tommy Lasorda, how he knew Roger Maris, and how these are the cleats McGuire wore 3 nights ago to hit his 65th home run, just going on about Roger Maris, just like all this stuff about it, and about like how, he never wanted anybody to beat the record that Maris had, but if anybody could do it, he would want McGuire to get it, and wants McGuire to, at that point, I guess he had beaten the record, but like just on and on. And he stops, like asking the front stage, what do you think about that? And the kid's like, I don't know. And Knight just like candle lit. I don't know is the single effing dumbest answer you could ever ask anybody. He just goes on and on.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm going to ask you that question again, and if you don't give me an answer I like I will kill you out of my U. I will call your parents. Like, you'll be out of this school. And like, ask the kid, like, so what do you think about that? And the kid's like, I hope McGuire hits another home run tonight. And Knight's like, you're goddamn right. I hope he does. Like, that was it.
That's awesome.
And then the other one was Knight like finished his story. Like another class, like Knight finished his thing, walked out. I was sitting in back. He came back to say something and just used me as like a rest. Just like had his hand like right there on my shoulder. And it's like, I look over him, and for those who don't, who are younger or never, and I did a couple like interviews with Knight, saw him in press rooms. Like he was this is like 98. He's still he's a huge guy. He's like a legit 6'7", 6'8". At that point, he was, not fat, but just like there's a lot of Knight there. And so he's sitting there like hand on me, and I'm just like, oh my God. All I remember thinking is like, don't burp, don't fart, like just don't do anything to draw attention. Like there's a 76 ring, and it's just, he's a big guy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. One of
anyway, sorry, and then go ahead.
You had to feel like the hand of God almost.
Yes.
Like if you think about like how that would feel, like it's almost like I've always heard that he exerts a great deal of physical pressure when he's, that he actually, it's not like, it's not like a reassuring tap on the shoulder. It's almost like I'm holding my weight up with you.
Yeah. So I will, we'll save the how Crimson Cast started for a different pod. But that's how Galen and I met. The only other, I have a bunch of other night stories just growing up around Indiana and Bloomington, but the other one is for WIUS. I ended up doing, it was like a game up in Indy, I believe. I forget all the details, but Jason Collier was on the team, and a guy for the Indy Star, I don't think it was Kravitz at the time, this is like 2000 or so, had just written an article about Knight, like him being past his time and all this stuff. Anyway, so I go to the game. I'm, still in college. I'm wearing like jeans and a polo. I didn't know what to wear to this stuff. I think I had like an old sport jacket, looked like crap. So I do not look like everyone else. Everyone else is like shirt and tie, professional. So I just sit in the middle. I'm just like, just like watching a press conference. Didn't realize I'm sitting next to, I don't think it's whoever wrote that article from the Star. So I'm sitting right next to him. An article just like kind of like ripped up Knight. So Knight just comes in. He's like, I'm not answering any questions. It's like, I want to talk to the media. I'm like pointing at this guy, but I think he's pointing at me, talking about how the media is unprofessional, undisciplined, like don't know how to do their jobs. And I'm like, oh my God, it's because I'm not wearing a tie. And it's like, it must be me. He is just dead on right into me.
Yeah.
And then just a pure night. He's like, anybody have any questions? Ever raise their hands? Like, F you, I'm done. Just walks off. And it wasn't until after everybody starts talking to the guy next to me, like, oh man, like, sorry about that article. I'm like, oh, it wasn't me. Like, all right, we're good. We're good. Yeah. But when, like, all I can say is when Knight would give you that, it was frightening. Just absolutely frightening.
Yeah. Yeah, the dude definitely had presence, and you're right. The one thing I hear most from people who maybe were not aware of Knight in terms of like, how he presents himself. The one thing people always come back and tell you is like, I didn't know he was that big.
Yeah.
I had no idea he was like 6'5", 6'6", and you're right that it's above just the point of being tall. Like, yeah, he definitely has an intimidating presence about him.
Yeah, no, he had a presence of a guy who ran, like, was just the leader of the state, like not just the university, like the leader of the state for 15, 20 years, and wasn't told no a lot. And, even in games, if you were sitting close, there's a couple times, again, growing up there in the 80s and 90s, and my friends and I would move down to the lower sections, and it was like seeing, a superhero character. It's like, oh my God, that's Iron Man. Like in the Iron Man suit, it's like Knight, like, oh, there's the sweater. And like, he's bit. It's just like, it's like seeing a superhero in their suit.
I remember going to Assembly Hall the first time for a game. I'm sitting opposite the IU bench. This was the Notre Dame game in '93 where he kicked the chair.
Fine. Yeah.
Yeah. And before he did that, he walks in. Some kid had somebody in the student section had a "We Don't Need Rudy Lindemann" sign. And he just walks up to him, takes the sign, and walks away. And it's almost like the admonishment was, he didn't have to say anything. It's just like, we don't do that to our players here at Indiana. And it was just every time he walked in, I remember Mike and I being and I think Scott, you're probably at the Illinois game too, when he got thrown up by Valentine the last time. That you knew the man was in control of the situation and command of the situation. Like it was like throwing the king off the throne there at that point. So it's definitely those are definitely some great experiences to have at that time in that era.
Yeah.
In Indiana. So speaking of that, we're going to quickly throw in a plug for our sponsors at Homefield Apparel. When you start talking retro and retro-esque apparel, there's no place better than Homefield. Football season is hey, Mike, I know we've been doing this for a while. How close are we? Do you have it on? Do you have the clock up?
Oh, the phone app. Yeah. Let's see. College football is exactly, let's see.
As Mike's looking it up, we're also like across the street, and here in Columbus, the kids go back to school tomorrow. So back to school shopping.
So it looks like we're 17 days, 23 hours, 39 minutes, and 12 seconds away from college football.
So check out all of the great merch at www.homefieldapparel.com and or check it out at your local haberdasher or clothier near you, including Kohl's or you bookstore, wherever you like to find your fine threads.
Yeah. And when we come back, we will find out exactly where on Scott's Spotify playlist does One Shining Moment currently reside. Next on X's and Joe's.
Welcome back to X's and Joe's. We're here with our good friend Scott Caulfield from Crimson Cast. Mike and I, when we first talked about this, Scott had this idea. You had this idea about one shining moment.
Right.
And it kind of resonated with the three of us because to me, it's always been the perfect synopsis of an NCAA tournament in a 3-minute, 45-second, used to be overly synthesized, 80 sounding Peebo Bryson type song that has now moved on to a little better production, a little different production. But really kind of what jumped out, what kind of got you into this, like into this vein where one shining moment, was just really kind of something that you mentioned something about recording a bunch of them and having that on either a VHS tape, I believe, for a period of time.
I should have found that VHS tape. So, I grew up in the 80s and it became, so I started watching college basketball right around when, 86, 87, 88. I remember watching the national championship game. I don't really remember watching that one shining moment. I was 9 at the time, so I didn't record it. It wasn't, I think, until like 91, 92. I have to go back and find the tape. I don't have a VHS that plays it anymore. Where I started like keeping track of those ones. I think it was 92. Because I remember watching the heck out of it where like someone has a picture of like In Night We Trust, and like he has a shot of him raising his eyebrows. But it's unlike anything in sports. But it's just encapsulated. I was thinking about it today as we're preparing for this. Like it's an encapsulation of a 3-week period of time where just like we are inundated with college basketball. And it's, I have the other leagues here. Not that you need to write this stuff down, but it's like the NFL doesn't have, it's just kind of like, all right, that's the end of the Super Bowl. Like, see you guys next year. That kind of ends it. Major League Baseball doesn't have anything like that. Like the NBA, I just finished going through the playoffs with the Pacers. Like it's a slog, not a slog, but it's like 2.5 months. You're like, oh my God, I forgot about that Bucks game. It's like, that felt like a year ago. You can't really do that. You also have different networks doing everything. Like it's very unique in college basketball that you have this kind of like, hey, we're going to wrap everything up with a montage song. It's very 80s, but it also, I think people really dig it. So, for me, I remember seeing it the first time and like, oh, that was awesome. And for those who, I hate being the old guy now, don't remember, it's like, then it's like, all right, well, I'll see it again next year. It's like there was, after it was done, like there was no way to see it again. It's not like you could go to the rerun channel or there was no computer that pulled it up. And so it's like, all right, well, I got to record this. So I literally used to have the one tape that I would record it. Then I do the double VCR to move it like from that tape to my master tape so I could watch all of them in order. And I would just sit there and kind of watch them and go back and look. And it was cool to see, like, we'll talk about, the first year it ever happened was 87 when Indiana won the title. It's like you go back and watch that one. It's like, oh, there's David Robinson. Like David Robinson was maybe on that one. And then obviously like Derek Coleman with Syracuse. But you start going through it and you start seeing, it's like, again, like you go back and like, oh my God, like that was, Jason Kidd on that Cal team, and you knew it, but it's like, oh, I forgot. Like, and you start going deeper into NBA players, start rewatching it. And then I think in like 2000 or 2001, iTunes just dropped all of them on iTunes. And it was like, oh my gosh, I can actually watch all of these and see these all at the same time. But where I also think, so for me, it was just like, it's so cool. It's like a great encapsulation of that year's March Madness. Like not so much the season, but it's like that year, but normally all the players that matter that year and people who had some kind of moment. And then you remember teams like, the John Wallace Syracuse team where, they make this run to the championship game. And it's like, man, that was cool. And then you go back and watch and it's like, they had like the weird, like John Wallace did the shake thing. And they had like the weird song with Raftery. And it does a great job of encapsulating everything. As somebody who loves college basketball, I would just go back and like during this time of the year, I just go back and watch some of those old ones.
Right.
Where it would get to be a bummer for me, it's like there would just be years and years where not a lot of Big Ten teams, Indiana was just not featured. Like for years, and I haven't gone back and rewatched. I probably should have watched all of them in preparation of this, but I remember like 94, the last shot that Indiana had in that one shining moment was like Sharon Wilkerson had hurt his knee or blew out his knee or something. It's like him hitting his knee. And then it's like we're just off one shining moment until 2002 for the most part. Like, we're just not in any of it. Unfortunately, a lot of Purdue in those years. And it got to get annoying. And we're back there now where it's like one of our big one shining moments is, the cheerleader knocking the ball off a couple years ago. And it's like, that's kind of all we got. So anyway, that's kind of where I thought about it. It's just like, it's something we haven't talked about and just a very Scott type topic of you guys go so deep in stuff. I was kind of running, like, I couldn't think of like what to ask about. So it's like, this is a fun thing, but I think it does weave into college basketball because it is like, if you like college basketball, and you're kind of excited for one shining. It's like, all right, the title's over. Villanova won. All right, let's see one shining. Let's see what they do this year.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's interesting, Scott. Looking at your interest in it, and you said that that it is different than the rest of the sports because it is a montage that is predictable. Everyone knows it's coming up at the end of the season. And you mentioned actually the Super Bowl doesn't have, something like that. But did you ever hear the story how the one shining moment almost became the Super Bowl theme?
No.
Yeah. So I mean, this is the story.
Really?
I was looking it up. I think I heard about this years ago, but in prep for this show, I kind of like re-looked it up, and it is actually true. So apparently, the guy that wrote One Shining Moment, and he was just just a musician that I guess did musical jingles and stuff like that. So the guy that wrote it, he was a high school pal of Armin Gatayan, who was working at CBS at the time. So he passed the recording to Gatayan, who then passed it on to the CBS sports production team. And they apparently, liked it a lot. And their plan was to actually use it in the 87 Super Bowl between the Broncos and the Giants. Okay. But because that game was so high scoring, it was I think it scored 60 points in that game. CBS ran well over their allotted time slot for that night. So they had to actually cut out the one shining moment sequence to avoid delaying the broadcast of, Airwolf. And so, so they basically were forced to, just kind of put it on the back burner, but they decided to use it on the next premium sports event on their calendar, which was 2 months later, which was the 87 NCAA tournament. So in an odd sort of way, I guess you can thank Phil Simms and Jan Michael Vincent for that song becoming a basketball theme rather than a football theme.
That's really funny. It reminds me of another great 80s story. Again, I think I was joking with my son or somebody else about this earlier. It might have been my son just kind of telling me about the 80s, but it's like cocaine's kind of the answer for everything. Like, why was everything nuts in the 80s? Cocaine. This has been joked about other places as well, but if you like the Karate Kid, there's, you're the best. Like the minute Daniel LaRusso goes into the tournament, they play You're the Best. And it's like just a great montage music. But the song is like history repeats itself. It's like, this is the first All Valley tournament he's been in. History's not repeating itself. That song was written, I think, for Rocky 2 or 3.
Okay.
But I think Stallone, I'm forgetting the whole story, but Stallone wanted his brother to write a song. So they cut it from that. And it's like just sitting around. It's like, we'll use it for Karate Kid. But it's like the lyrics of it makes zero sense for the music. But again, it's like just guys being like, all right, sounds good. Let's do it. Run that song.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Stallone real quick. I was with friends of ours this weekend, and he was telling a story that was related to him about Stallone and Eye of the Tiger. That when he finds Survivor for Rocky 3 to do kind of the second part of the music, he changes the musical tone from the traditional Rocky to the Survivor type stuff that's going to stay for the next movie and a half. And they put hours into an alternative track that they thought was going to be the song. Stallone heard that, was like, meh. But then he hears Eye of the Tiger, which was kind of a throwaway that they were doing. And like, that's the one, let's go with it. That's been the song ever since. So it's kind of like Stallone's selection process on his music goes back to, you know, what you're talking about. It's like some of the stuff just doesn't make any sense. I mean, I'm thinking like watching this, that's interesting though, Mike, that it was a Super Bowl thing, because Ben and I were watching last night, and there were a couple things that jumped out at me as we were watching the 87 one. The best highlight, I think, was the one where Steve Alford passes to Steve Isle in the 116 game, and he throws a wraparound pass behind his back to Dean Garrett dunking the ball down. And if you think about a college, like what you see is really a cool college basketball transition play, that was it. And it was Indiana's actually dunking the basketball. I mean, you're seeing Big Ten teams making athletic plays during one shining moment, which kind of goes back to the point that we were talking about. You're not really seeing that as much. What you're seeing is, again, cheerleaders popping it down, or a guy snapping his towel on the bench, waving it during an upset type situation. It's just a different feel when you look at the Big Ten teams' highlights in a one shining moment versus, I don't know, Jerry Stackhouse in the late 90s, just like putting his chin above the rim to slam the ball down.
I agree with you. I mean,
it's a different world.
It's great ball movement in that one, but I rewatched the 87 one again. I was also shocked by just how above the rim Syracuse was playing. Like, there's like 5 different shots of either Derek Coleman or somebody. Like, Derek Coleman has one where it's like, oh, it's a missed shot. And it's like, oh no, he's coming in as like his armpit is at the rim. And you watch that, and there's a shot of Keith Smart dunking in the finals where like he's trying to get over, and you're just like, damn, we look so small compared to, like, how did we beat Syracuse? They look unbelievably big.
There
are games from that.
3 helps.
Yeah.
That helps. There are some games though, watching those that you go back on that 87 year and you wonder, how the hell did we get out of this game alive? Like between LSU, UNLV, and then that Syracuse game, there are moments where you're thinking, it's like watching a Bond film and you're thinking, how does James Bond get out of this situation? It's like, it's almost impossible.
The 87 one, again, IU wins, so we should watch it. You should almost watch it every morning when you wake up. It's also like maybe the purest the music has been in a while, because they went to like Jennifer Hudson and like Luther Vandross. Like, they started monkeying with the music. They've now kind of gone back to normal. Although I do love they've woven in like plays, like calls from the game, like the audio play-by-play call, which I like. But that 87 one has a lot of interesting things where you have, you know, Boeheim gets doused with water on the court. I remember doing a deep dive, and it's like, that's one of the first like dumps of water on a basketball court, I think, ever. Like, I don't think there's been a lot of guys getting the Gatorade bath during a game. It obviously wasn't for the title, because they didn't win the title going to the Final Four. There's also, you know, I watched this, and we talked about Knight at the beginning, that there's a scene, I think it's from the game against UNLV in the Final Four, where Knight's like pissed at the officials and like just slams a phone, and the receiver goes nuts. But it's like, that's a double technical today. Like, it's at least a technical. And that's leading the A block and PTI of like, we lost control. You know, what's happening? Like, it just happened, and it's like, Knight's mad. Like, give him what he wants, so he'll leave us alone. Like, it's like, that doesn't happen today without at least 2 technical fouls. Like, there's just some wild stuff in there.
My son watched.
I'm sure the ref is thinking like, well, the phone didn't go on the court, so it's fine.
Right.
My son's watching. I had to look at him and say, "Now, Bennett, I know you're turning 3. Do we ever hit a telephone and break it?" No, Daddy, that's okay. Because you're now watching your son going, I don't want my kid copying these antics in any way, shape, or form. I could just see my kid tossing a chair across the dining room sometime because he saw it, and that's that sort of thing as you're watching it. But it does kind of show that difference. The other one that got
amazing. No other sport has done this, because it really is like a cliff notes of that year's tournament. You know, the year Darvin Ham broke the backboard, which is what I knew him for years. It's like, that's in there. Like, anything that happened that's like, oh my God, do you remember that crazy buzzer beater? It's like, just go back and watch One Shining Moment. Like, it's in there. And that's what I find really fun. And I still find myself going back and just rewatching them. I like some of the production value differently. Like, it's a bummer. In 2002, I went back and rewatched that one also, where Indiana made the Final Four, or the final game against Maryland. You know, it's like, that's the year they started really monkeying with production, where they have like a TV inside of a TV with like shots of moving stars underneath it. And it's like, just show us basketball, please. Like, I don't want to see so many shots of like the Oklahoma mascot moving his head around. It's also like Indiana's not in it for the first 2.5 minutes. Like there's one shot of Mike Davis, a quick shot of us beating Duke, and then it's a none of us. I would say that when we get kind of the hero shot at the end of like the Indiana team doing the huddle, you get a great, again, another little wraparound pass from Coverdale to I think Newton coming in for the dunk. But even then, it's like it's amazing because I remember that game against Maryland. It was kind of that, I think, Jawan Dixon, like there's a ball going out of bounds. I think the game was like close. I forget exactly where it was. He saves it. It's like that's in there. Like they do a great job of even getting moments from the game that are kind of the most instrumental for that game.
Right. Yeah, agreed. So as we kind of go through that, that 2002 Indiana team is an interesting kind of segue into what's happened with the Big Ten and why we really have seen the tournament performance in really the era, the one shining moment era. And I know Mike's, we got a couple slides up here. This is kind of a quick little spreadsheet that shows from 87, which is the one shining moment beginning to present, how Big Ten teams have fared since this, since really kind of goes back and shows the entire work since the 64 team format of the tournament. And you notice a lot of these programs, multiple programs have multiple 1 or 2 seeds. It should also be noted that, the 3 national titles the Big Ten has won in the one shining moment era, 2 of them were actually happened before the Berlin Wall fell, when IU won it in 87 and Michigan wins it in 89.
And isn't the 89 one, is that been or is that their Final Four of the year? Like
the Final Fours have been
taken away.
Now someone might say, well, now you skipped Maryland's national championship.
They're not in the Big Ten.
Not in the Big Ten. So yeah, these are only programs when they were in the Big Ten and what they've actually accomplished. So for those of you, it'll be in the show notes if you're listening, but if you're watching, you can kind of see this and kind of take a look at it. But you see programs, you can kind of see Michigan State in particular, Purdue in particular, as well as Michigan. Those are the 3 with the most numbers of Sweet 16s, but a lot of those were kind of done after 2000. A lot of that success, I mean, you still had some success before that, but a lot of that success has been more recent success. Guys, what as you kind of look at this, you see this that the last 25 years it just hasn't worked all that well for the Big Ten in that final game.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this, I think there's 2 ways to look at it. Like on one hand, it hasn't been good. And I do think there's some style of play and the way that officiating happens in the Big Ten that we should definitely talk about. I also think if you look since Indiana in 02, you have Illinois 05, Ohio State 07, Michigan State 09, 13 Michigan, 15 Wisconsin, 18 Michigan, 24 Purdue, all years that the Big Ten had a team in the final game. Going 0-8 or 0-9 in those games is a little bit bad luck. Like you flip a coin enough times, you're going to flip it differently. Right. You could also say some of those teams like, the Purdue, Michigan State, they ended up having the same, the issues of the Big Ten kind of revealed themselves finally. But I would also look at it and say, if 3 of those games, you just change the order and you have 3 titles in there, like, let's just give one to Michigan State, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Right. I'm not sure we're having this discussion. It's like, all right, we're cashing it in. So I do think that's part of it there. I would also say just from an Indiana-centric position here, I see the other conference. Look at the ACC. It's like, for the most part, Duke has been good this entire time. North Carolina, minus a little dip here and there, has been good the entire time. And then it's like, all right, at the time, Maryland kind of has its ups and downs. I think one of the problems with this is that historically one of the best teams in the Big Ten was Indiana, and they helped provide a lot of that tournament success. And basically since 2002, Indiana's just been MIA. Just took power out of it. And I don't know how good the SEC would look if Kentucky just decided to go in the wilderness for 25 years, or the same thing with Duke and the ACC. If Duke's just like, hey, we're out for 20 years, we'll see you guys in, 2054. I'm not sure if you're going to have another team just automatically step up. I think that's partially what the Big Ten problem is if Indiana had been as consistent as, let's say, Michigan State, it's like, all right, now those, and Purdue, it's like now you have 2 or 3 that are just there every single year getting a shot at it. and then other teams like Wisconsin are kind of up and down, I think it might have a different result as well.
Right. Yeah, I'd agree with that, Scott, because when I look at the numbers, I'm oftentimes looking at the rosters of the teams in the finals. And I think you're right. If you took, like, let's say one of those Big Ten teams that made to the finals, and you just swapped out the team they faced to, let's say, a different year, there's some of those I think that would have like snuck through. Like I think of the three teams I highlighted in my research that you could probably say, okay, these are like the three Big Ten teams that are like really probably should have won, or at least were at least within the range of winning. I think of like the 2015 Wisconsin team,
Right.
with Kaminsky, Decker, Hayes, all of them. The 2005 Illinois squad, D. Brown, Deron Williams, and all of them. And the 2009 team that Michigan State had, which was like Draymond Green, Kalen Lucas. You look at some of those teams, those are like, especially with the 2005 Illinois team and that 2009 MSU team, those, in terms of like the on paper talent, were probably the two of the most talented Big Ten teams the last, quarter century.
I would asterisk and throw in, I've always said this, the 2012 Indiana team, which I know lost in the Sweet 16.
Right.
They gave Kentucky the most run for their money in that tournament. And I think had Indiana played anybody else in that, like, they're in the Final Four. Like, I just think if Kentucky's in any other bracket, I think they were meeting Kentucky in that tournament wherever they met. It's just they met him in the Sweet 16. So I always throw that in there.
No, that's
Scott,
absolutely true. Yeah, and
I think it's fair to also say that was the reason why that IU team, that Kentucky, the performances against Kentucky the year before, and the amount that was returned to the roster with Verdell Jones being replaced by Yogi Ferrell,
right?
That was the reason why IU gets that number one preseason.
Yeah,
that the main reason behind the 2013 surge, which you see with Indiana, was one of those, their last one seed. That was the impetus behind that, was IU's ability to, just how they showed themselves against the University of Kentucky when nobody else was able to be competitive with them.
Exactly. No, that's very true. Yeah, and I think there's some other teams in the Big Ten that we could like asterisks as well that are kind of like fit in the same bucket. I was interested in these two examples because, again, on paper, they're just as talented as many of the other title teams that have won in, let's say, the last 25 years. But the problem is that so many times when the Big Ten put together one of these like really elite squads, they ran into a team outside the Big Ten that was even more elite than what they were. You look at the 2005 Illinois team. They had 7 top 80 recruits and 5 future NBA dudes, which is way above the average of even the title winning teams in the Big Ten, like conference winning. But the problem is that they ran into a UNC team that had 9 top 80 dudes and 7 future pros. The same thing that MSU ran into. I mean, they had 8 top 80 dudes versus 11 top 80 dudes for North Carolina. And you kind of see as you look at the numbers, like in those examples where the Big Ten like makes it to the title game, invariably they're running against a team that actually just has more talent than they do. And we'll get into this a little bit in segment 2, but that's at least one part of the problem I think that the Big Ten had, is that if you had taken, let's say, that 2009 Michigan State team and threw them against like some of the other, let's say, championship winning teams that had maybe less talent, I think Scott's point is definitely accurate. You probably could have seen 1 or 2 of those Big Ten teams maybe break through and break the streak.
Well, and I would also throw in that Comiskey at Wisconsin in 2015. I watched some of his highlights, or kind of some plays that he was in during that Final Four run. He was a modern big. I think a lot of times we look at a guy like Frank Comiskey and we get him confused like with an Ethan Hop or somebody, where you're just thinking they're pumping it to the post in 1 out of 3 plays. In reality, Comiskey was definitely a guy that could be more of a Euro style big, and versus other traditional Big Ten players. So that Wisconsin team in the mid 2010s was very unique because they could score in multiple ways. But again, they were still also stuck in a situation where you just had a few more playmakers on those teams, with Duke that year, with Okafor in particular. Going back though to that Illinois and Carolina final game, remember that team for Illinois was coached by Bruce Weber. Bruce Weber gets there because Bill Self goes to Kansas because Roy Williams went to Carolina.
Right.
It's essential to remember that Bill Self is coaching at Kansas, but he recruited that team that was at Illinois.
True.
So part of this, you get some coaching carousel things that pop into play that impact how this shakes out. And Bruce Weber was never quite able to replicate what Bill Self was able to do from a recruiting standpoint when he was at Illinois.
Well,
so
also not forget that North Carolina team had Sean May, who I think we can always just asterisk if Knight doesn't get fired, Sean May is more than likely playing at IU.
Yeah,
100%. 100%.
I mean, there's a lot of counterfactuals you can play with the Knight firing, but to me, it's always like I'm pretty sure Hastings comes back his senior year, and I'm pretty sure Sean May is playing for IU.
Totally.
I would agree. And so as we go on kind of the next slide, that we have here, it kind of just shows a graphic. Oh, yeah, one back.
Oh, sorry.
A line graph here, which kind of just shows, again, the conferences have remained relatively close to each other. And you got to think with SEC, a lot of those are Kentucky. ACC, a lot are Duke and Carolina. You've got some Wake Forest. You've got some Arkansas thrown in. You've got Florida, obviously, in the SEC. Between those, Wake Forest and the ACC. Georgia Tech had a couple years in the 90s. So you see the main where you see a real shift in the standard deviation, where you see that where you have more than that of the differentiation is runners up versus national titles. So it's not like the Big Ten's been lousy. It's just, as we're saying, it's one or two pieces that hurt you in that final game. And even though teams, I think we've talked about this a lot on the show, where it's not rough for a team to be able to go from, not rough, but it's more doable to make the Final Four than it is once you get to the Final Four of winning that final game. That there really are very few true surprises that come out of the blue and win a final game of the NCAA tournament. At least not since we've had the 3-point line in the one shining moment era. I don't think there's really a team that you can just say, boy, that came out of left field.
To win the whole thing.
To win the whole thing.
No, I mean, people would point to Butler, but my argument would be, I distinctly remember sitting in my old house, but I used to listen to, don't kill me, but this was, a while back. I listened to Dockich. I'd just have Dockich in the background listening to him. But, he was talking about Butler early that year about how something's happening here, something's going on. I kind of stuck that in the back of my head. And that was the year I looked at it. I was like, I'm going to pick Butler to go to the Final Four in my bracket. And I look like a genius. But it's like, if I'm picking them to the Final Four, it's not like that was a complete, absolute surprise. I think, to win the title, I think so. I mean, there was a year like Chicago, Illinois, Chicago, or the St. Mary one, or the
Loyola Chicago
with Sister Mary. They made it pretty far. But yeah, I would say it's probably Butler has gotten the closest. But if you're really watching basketball, you weren't as shocked as some other things. So I'd agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's also interesting in the chart, Bob, how you see a lot of parity at the early part of the tournament. Mm-hmm. And there's really just not, some kind of crazy separation. But again, towards the end of the tournament, you see sort of wild separation, especially for the sake of the Big Ten. What I notice is that if you look at some of the other numbers in terms of whether it's Ken Pom or even like the recruiting and things like that, if you look at sort of like the middle of the conferences, there's really not that much variance. Like the sixth best team of the Big Ten in like the 2000s and 2010s is not that different from the sixth best team in the ACC or the SEC. It's really where the difference really comes in at is at the very, very top of the conference, that there's a wild variance that happens, across the conferences, but particularly for the Big Ten relative to the SEC and all that. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting also notice that if you look at, even when the Big Ten was winning the ACC Big Ten Challenge, those are happening some of the same years where the Big Ten is losing to the ACC in the national championship game. It's like the 2009 year where we talk about like Michigan State losing in the title to UNC. Well, the Big Ten won in 2009 the ACC Big Ten Challenge. Same goes for 2015 when Wisconsin lost in the championship game. They won the ACC Big Ten Challenge then as well. So it's kind of this weird thing where, you think about the big picture of it. Like, does it really matter if Iowa is marginally less mediocre than Boston College?
Right.
In the grand scheme of things, in terms of winning national championships. And I think that's kind of been the problem the Big Ten's had, is that there's this focus on the conference as a whole. It's like, well, man, look how many teams we put in the tournament every year. Look how, we win a certain number of, first round games, things like that, that's become their measuring stick. But the problem is that championships are kind of won by individual teams within a conference, not by conferences. And that's I think a big problem.
And the thing that I was thinking about with this is, to me, of all of those runners up, the one that is like, if you're a Big Ten fan that stings, is 2009, because you have Michigan State in the Final Four in Detroit. It's just like that should be, everything's there for you. But you go back and look at the Ken Pom standings that year. It's like Michigan State. I mean, they have Draymond Green. He's a freshman. It's like they're the 9th best team in Ken Pom that year. The best team is North Carolina. So it's like, unfortunately, to your point, Mike, like the best Michigan State team in that run was probably, I'm looking at like 2012. They were ranked 3rd in the country or something like that. I just did this really quick on the fly because I was thinking of as we were talking about it. Ken Pom goes back to 97. So not, most of the one shining moment era. It doesn't go back to 87. The number of times the season has ended with a Big Ten team ranked first in Ken Pom in that number of times. Yeah. Any guesses on how many times it's happened?
Twice.
Wow. Oh, Bob, winner. Ding, ding, ding. Chicken dinner. Twice. 2011 Ohio State and 2000 Michigan State. Michigan State. So they, that was the year they won it. So there you go. Got one down. But I think that's the point here is, you look at, and I didn't do the other conferences because we're also doing a live podcast, but like ACC, I saw 5 different times they were first. The SEC is up there. You have the American Conference. A lot of conferences are up there. The fact that you have a conference as good as the Big Ten, and you're talking 25 plus years, only 2 times have you finished with a team as the number 1 team. In a lot of years, you look at 2000, like Michigan State is the number 1 team. The next Big Ten team, you got to go down to 13 to get to Illinois. It's like I'm looking at, and again, one random year, but it's like Texas, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Oklahoma in the Big 12, all there. Now you look at last year in Ken Pom, it's like the SEC has Florida, Auburn, Tennessee, Alabama at 3 through 6. You got to get to 7 before you get to Michigan State. I think this is the problem: is there's not enough teams in the Big Ten that are hitting that 1, 2, 3 every single year in the top of Ken Pom.
It's also hard if you're a Big Ten team to do it, because you start looking at the middle of the conference, or really think about conference ranking 3 to maybe even 12. And it's almost like a super speedway. It's like Talladega, super speedway type, restrictor plate racing, where you just have a bunch of cars packed together. One tries to make a move, gets hung out to drive, goes down back to the end of the line. And that could be a 1 or a 2 game type of slip, where you look at the variance between the top of the, kind of the top of the conference and playing in, getting a first round bye in the Big Ten tournament. And sometimes you don't have a whole lot of difference between those teams from a standpoint of win-loss records. And then that translates to Ken Pom. Like when you look at Ken Pom and you look at 15 to 25, you have 5 Big Ten teams that are kind of jumping in there all time in Ken Pom. They're swapping back and forth. Indiana's one of them at 17. So even in this drought that Indiana's been in, Indiana's still top 20 in Ken Pom over the course of this era all time. Purdue is in the top 25. Ohio State's at 15 right now. So you start thinking that the conference tends to beat on itself pretty hard, which impacts your seeding, which impacts those analytics rankings, which makes it hard for somebody to jump out ahead and stay ahead.
I would also say just throwing this out there. I think part of it is the way that the teams and some of the coaches at the upper level in the Big Ten also recruit. And so just going through some of the teams that have been in that final game, you have Purdue, and Painter is great. I would take his last 20 years as an IU fan, but he recruits a specific type of team, a player. He recruits the area. It's all really good. He has not historically gone after that top tier 5-star talent in bunches. Like, he's going after recruiting teams that can win the Big Ten. So that's partially there. Even Michigan State, Michigan State's been up there a lot. Izzo recruits, and he does get some 5-stars. He does get some top tier talent, but he packs it around a system that's very Big Ten oriented. Ohio State's been popping up there for a couple of times. They've had moments where they get, Greg Oden and Mike Conley, kind of because IU doesn't want to recruit them. But they're a football school. I know it can happen, but like, they've never had a Nate Oates type who goes to a football school. It's like, hey, I'm just going to bang the heck out of 5-star recruits. And I think that's part of the problem too. Indiana famously has just been unable to kind of figure out recruiting under any of these coaches the last 15 years, a whole different podcast. You look at Wisconsin, they don't recruit 5-star talent. They're like, we're not doing that. We're going to go a different route. And I think that's part of the problem too, is you don't, as you guys have talked about in the pod, like, you don't need to have 5 stars to win at all, but you do need to have some. Like, you don't need to have all 5 stars, but you need to have some talent or some program and I think that's part of the problem as well. I mean, Michigan probably has done the best at trying to do that, but they've also been a little scattered in their consistency with it. And so I think that's part of the problem too, is you just don't have coaches or programs that are inherently like, hey, we're going to just go after all of the talent, which is kind of what you're seeing in the SEC right now. Like, that's exactly what Bruce Pearl, Nate Oates, like those guys are doing. It's like, hey, we're just going to go after uber athletic 6'8" guys and just pound the heck out of them. And like, there's really not been a Big Ten school doing that since maybe Illinois in the 80s.
Right.
Yeah.
So when we come back, we're gonna delve into that, because I think, Scott, that's a great segue into kind of our next segment, where we actually get into what's actually been going on with recruiting, how the systems of the Big Ten impacted a little bit, and what can be kind of done to move forward, and and to kind of break the mold here a little bit when we come back on X's and Joes.
Welcome back to X's and Joes. I'm Mike Wiemuth, joined by Coach Bob Moats and our guest, Scott Caulfield. So now we get to dig into the why questions on the conference underperformance in March. And, those that have followed Bob and I have probably understand that, we both long preached the full catechism on the roster differences between the Big Ten and the other major conferences in terms of size, skill, athleticism, style play, all that. I guess for this discussion, I'm a little bit more interested in our guest take on this, as this was his personal topic selection. So Scott, I guess you can take this any direction you want, but I guess my question would be, was there a specific year or instance or moment during the tournament in the past where you started to notice that the Big Ten was just being sort of pushed off center stage, compared to the rest of college basketball? And I guess the follow-up question would be, did you think there was a specific cause for it at that time?
It's a good question. I definitely feels like Indiana's been pushed off the stage for sure. As we have barely been in the one shining moment. To me, it's like, I would love to see a graph showing the amount of time each team has been in the one shining moment. Because to me, that's also like, that's a good, what your KenPom ranking is at the end of the season is good. But like, if you're not pushing 25 or 30 seconds in one shining moment, you probably didn't have an awesome March.
Hey, that's like a job for our interns.
Yeah, no, interns, get on that. Like, I'd be curious how much time on one shining moment Big Ten teams have had over time. That's a lot of coding, or that's probably an AI. Like, I could probably do that in ChatGPT in like 3 seconds. So, it's a good question. I've always believed in what I said earlier. Like, it doesn't feel like the Big Ten's being pushed off the stage, because back to that graph you had up earlier, like, we have the most runner-ups of any conference out there. So it's not like you get to the Final Four and there's not a Big Ten team. Normally you're going to have Michigan or Michigan State or Illinois or random Wisconsin. Like it does feel like the Big Ten is always involved. It just feels like they cannot close the deal when it gets to the very last moment. And so I would say I've yet to really feel that. Honestly, I would say the closest I felt to it is probably the last year or two. Just with what the SEC has done in the last couple of years, it really is stark seeing, because over the years of the one shining moment era, I love calling it that now, the other champions have been kind of from your standard blue blood, groups. You have the North Carolinas, you have the Dukes, and it's like those were never years you're like, oh my God, what's going on here? Connecticut kind of came out of it, but it's like, all right, they're from the Big East. Like that's a basketball conference. And it's like Calhoun knows what he's doing and they're recruiting their own little bubble up there. Syracuse, it felt like that was Boeheim finally getting everything together in one year. This is really the first time it's like you look up and it's like, whoa, we got Alabama and Auburn, and Baylor. It's like all of these teams that have never really been perennial powers are suddenly there. And so I would honestly say it's the last couple of years, just because it does feel like you're seeing a sea shift. You're seeing a lot of younger coaches come in and change things up. And this was some of the first times when I was watching the tournament the last couple of years, looking at like Alabama and Houston and teams like that, where I'm just like, that doesn't look like any Big Ten team or any Big Ten game I've ever seen. And I'm not sure I have felt that way in years past.
Yeah, that's probably the number one thing I used to text to Bob when I was like watching an SEC game, and Bob can obviously attest to this.
Yeah.
And this is going back even well before we did, a show or anything. And yeah, you're right. I would watch a game, like a high-end SEC game, and I would just kind of go through. And I mean, I knew the players, and their high school ranks and all that kind of stuff. But the thing that kind of stood out was like, man, if you took even some of the best Big Ten players, dropped them just from a helicopter into that arena and just put them on either squad, I really wonder how many of them would actually have got playing time for some of those coaches, And so, yeah, you're right. I think there's a visual component to it. There's a numbers component to it, but you're right. I think we've all kind of felt the same in recent years. Like, man, that just visually, it just looks completely different from, like the SEC and the Big 12 versus the Big 10.
Jaden Ivey obviously plays for just about anybody. I think you could put him on just about any team and say, okay, this guy, he can play. I think Romeo Langford, had he gone anywhere, would have gotten significant playing time as well. So those are the types of players we're talking about. The question is, who's your 2 and your 4 in that situation? Because I'll guarantee you that if you have Jaden Ivey playing at Auburn, he's not going to have Fletcher Lawyer and Caleb First as his 2 and 4 in that situation. So it's not just getting one player, it's getting 3 players in those what I call the wing positions. So there's leads, there's wings, there's posts. And you're also not going to be having a team that's going to be pumping the ball down to the block to a post player 20% of the time.
And that's my thing with those teams. Like Jaden Ivey looks like an SEC player, but it's like, but you have a 7'5" center in the middle. Like it's like that is just Big Ten. Like that's
nowhere to go. Yeah,
right. There's nowhere to play. Like and that's the difference. Like Houston is just 5 out, just 5 guys out. There's no one in the middle. Like we're just going to keep crossing and play crazy and then it's tough to plug in a guy like Ivy when you have a guy like Edey.
Right. Yeah. And then First also, who's also taking up the weak side, sometimes that pinch post mid or weak side dunker spot because they need to get him in places where he can score the basketball. So yeah, and so that's kind of a question with the slides here, as we kind of bring up, with Mike, because I think that it does have a mathematic or kind of a numbers correlation here, that when you think about that sweet spot and elite to sweet spot type players, where the Big Ten has been in this century.
Yeah.
Well, and also, like, we haven't talked about coaches as much either. And I think that's partially some of it there too, is that Izzo is awesome. So Izzo has been head and shoulders one of the best coaches. I think Beeline was one of the best coaches in that era in the Big Ten. But I think, you look at who was the talent coach of the last 25 years, like Krzyzewski and Roy Williams and Jay Wright and Calhoun for a while, and now you have Bobby Hurley. not Bobby Hurley, Dan Hurley.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like I do wonder, taking DeVries out of this. We haven't seen him coach a game at IU. I'm not saying this is no knock on him at all, but I wonder, does the Big Ten have the top tier coaching talent right now as well? Because it does feel like a lot of these teams, you know, with Florida and Alabama, and, you know, has some of the better younger coaches out there. Like, does the Big Ten have the coaches to compete at the highest level?
Yeah.
It's interesting because I would throw this out, that the last round of the coaching carousel. First off, let's go one before that. Why Michigan went after Juwan Howard to replace John Beilein, and then Indiana followed suit with the Mike Woodson hire. Part of that, I think, was to try to break the mold on recruiting inside the conference. That both coaches came in saying, I'm going to go for NBA level talent, and I know I can land them because I'm a league guy. It didn't work in either of those two cases. But now the next step is when you look at the replacements of those two coaches, Darren DeVries at Indiana, Dusty May at Michigan. May run systems, and we'll talk about systems here in a second more, but May run systems at Michigan that are attractive to modern type of basketball players. You know, Danny Wolf is a great example of this, where Danny Wolf is kind of a multi-skilled, multi-tool player. He's not a block big. He is a 25 and in big. Nico Medvedev going to Minnesota. You know, that's probably the best hire they could have made, because he can actually attract a better recruit, a skilled recruit, because of what he was able to do at Colorado State, and especially in three-point efficacy. Thinking McCollum at Iowa is another good example of the best switch from McCaffrey, where you have somebody who can bring the right guys into that, get a slightly more skilled type of player. I think you can see more of that happening. And then Buzz Williams going to Maryland too. You can see more of this kind of taking place, where it's going to be less that Bo Ryan approach or that Tom Izzo approach, which rubbed off on a guy like Matt Painter. I think you're going to see more guys that are going to have more innovative systems that's going to bring a different level of talent into play. So like Minnesota, instead of going sub 150, may find themselves actually being able to get a few more 150 plus players coming up, higher than 150 players coming into their program.
Yeah. I think you're right, Scott. Also, just in reference to the coaches and just thinking of like all the elite dudes that are outside the Big Ten. It's not only just that, those guys were there. It's that they were oftentimes peaking at the same time as that the Big Ten's best coaches were peaking as well.
Right.
You think about like the best Thad Matta team just happened to coincide with the best Billy Donovan team.
Right.
And, Painter, his best teams came around exactly the same time as Dan Hurley's best teams have been coming around. Izzo with Roy Williams, Beilein with Jay Wright. I mean, there's these odd sort of coincidences of, these outside Hall of Fame level dudes, like having their best stuff happening exactly the same time as the Big Ten's coaches were having some of their best runs. So, but you're right. I mean, if you think back, just honestly asking the question, when was the last time the Big Ten had the number one coach in the country over the course of, say, a 10-year period?
Well, and part of this, I'm going to go against myself here to set, like, part of this is a self-fulfilling prophecy in that, like, if Izzo wins, let's just give Izzo a win in 09 and a random one in 16, or what, just give Izzo 2 more titles. Like, that changes everything.
Right.
So I brought this up. I agree with my old self from 5 minutes ago, but it's kind of tough to say, like, part of the reason there hasn't been the number one coach is because they're not winning titles. Like, these are circular arguments that keep going. But you're right, Mike. Like, I'm not sure who the best coach over it had to be Izzo, or possibly Beilein.
Would you say it over a 10-year period that there's Tom Izzo was number one over Roy or Coach K?
Probably not, because of those titles.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's what it comes down to, is like, if Izzo had won in 09, maybe you say from 2000 to 2010, it's like there's 2 titles and a bunch of Big Ten titles. Like, Izzo's the best coach in that 10-year period. Beilein from 10 to 20, it's like you have 2 final games in 13 and 18. if he cashes both of those, it's like that changes everything. So it becomes that. But I mean, in the end, it's like the guys aren't getting it done. And that's where like I look at Izzo as a really interesting legacy is, he's had a 25-year run that has been unparalleled in the Big Ten. Just tons of Big Ten title, tons of Final Fours, has obviously shown that he'll play anybody anywhere. He gets his teams ready for March. That's kind of always the talk. It's like that team's ready in March, but yet they haven't cashed in for years. And Coach K had some of that too. Coach K won the 2 early titles in 91 and 92 or 92 and 93, like, won the back-to-backs. And then it's like just had a long, what at the time felt like 8 or 9 year stretch where they couldn't get anything done. And then he cashed a couple more in. And, it does feel like Izzo could use 1 or 2 more titles to really garnish that legacy. I think if he got those, we'd retroactively give him a lot more shine.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a syllogism problem in it. Is that, winning defines the best, and and so if you lack that, then it's assumed that you're not the best. But I probably think that Bobby Knight, like 75 to like early 90s, is probably the one time you could say for a good chunk of that 15-year period, the Big Ten had the number 1 coach. Or at least, 1A or 1B within college basketball.
And what Scott just said about Tom Izzo could have been said exactly about Dean Smith. About Dean Smith really going into 1991, 1992. That last title that he won in 93, when you think about the game's all-time wins leader, which Dean Smith had for a significant period with only 2 national championships, that was always kind of a sore spot with some of the Carolina fans, that there was always kind of the thing of, well, Dean can't win the big one until he started winning one big one with Jordan, then wins another big one in 93 with Montrose and company. So there's that is kind of that one shining moment mindset where you think at the end of this, and that montage, are you the one holding up the championship? Is that really kind of is that where you're at? And does that really cement your legacy or kind of show people or the fans, or as you look back on those seasons, well, they were good, but they weren't that good comparatively, considering that you're, I don't know, number 2 out of 361 teams would be the other way to look at it. It's like, you're still pretty damn good at what you're doing if you're standing there at the end of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, the coaching side of it is it's definitely debatable, and it's I think you're right that some of those coaches are so close to each other that it does come down to like other factors. It's like, okay, one guy might just have a little bit of luck, a little bit better point guard, and maybe they were a little bit more rested towards the end. So it's
and it does feel like the Big Ten, and again, this is just perception, just a random fan from the outside. It feels like the SEC is kind of like, all right, they're refreshing. Like, we're going to get a bunch of young coaches and we're going to make a push to really change how our league is run. It does feel like right now the Big Ten really does need a reset in basketball, in that it's kind of been run by Izzo and Painter, and it definitely feels like Izzo is kind of the de facto head of Big Ten basketball. Like, he's,
the dean.
Yeah, I mean, he's the dean, and rightfully so. But he's somebody who also isn't huge into NIL. Like, his recruiting has been, interesting the last couple of years. Like, it does feel like now no one, it's not like Dusty May can be like, all right, man, I had 1 good year, I'm going to be in charge. Like, DeVries, like, hey, I've been here 10 minutes, I'm going to take over for this. I haven't won a game in the Big Ten yet. Like, you really need, that's where some of these SEC programs are in good positions, where it's like, you're golden at Florida. You're literally golden. It's like, you could walk into the SEC basketball coaches meeting, like, hey guys, I'm going to start dictating how things go around here. And, Nate Oates can kind of do that too, because he had a lot of success very early on. It feels like the Big Ten needs some of its younger coaches to start having some success so we can push that out. Because I do feel like, back to kind of the broader logic, this does feel like a conference that has been kind of run by Tom Izzo, Beeline, and Painter for a good number of years, but mostly Izzo. And, we're nearing the end of that time. Like, this is normally, for the most part, outside of that Dean Smith example, coaches near the end don't normally kind of ramp it up one last time, especially when they're seemingly, with Izzo, at so much at odds with how the game is changing. It feels like the Big Ten really needs to step in and be like, all right, we need a more clear North Star and someone to lead us there who's not out of Michigan State.
Right. Exactly.
Every March, I look at Michigan State. I start watching them carefully, thinking Izzo's going to just go up to a press conference and say, "This is it." I just can't. I can just see him say, "At this moment, I no longer really enjoy doing this like I did 10 years ago, 5 years ago," especially with where the recruitment, where recruiting is going, and the fact that it's a 365-day cycle almost anymore, where there's really no downtime. You're going right from the end of your season into the portal to fill pieces, but also re-recruit your roster, which has got to drive a guy like Tom Izzo absolutely crazy.
Right.
Trying to go back and say to your players, okay, now you really want to stay here, right? I don't see him having that conversation with a bunch of kids at the end of the season. It's going to be like, you really want to leave, you can go. I can see him kind of having that mindset towards.
Well, and that's to bring us to IU. Like, I look at us as like we're in a really interesting spot where if it's not going to happen this year, we're not going to the Final Four. But if DeVries can have some early success and stack on it and just get a nice tournament run or two in 2 or 3 years, like the kind of the pseudo lead of the Big Ten from the coaching perspective is there. I mean, you look at the Big Ten. The standings last year, we're talking about Michigan State. It's like Izzo has 3 to 4 years left, maybe. I mean, maybe a year, like depending on how tired he is of doing all the things you talked about. Maryland just changed their coach. Michigan, maybe it is Dusty May, maybe not. We'll see. Purdue, Painter's been there a while. So, he's nearing the end. It feels like we are hitting that point in the Big Ten where there's a shift in who's going to coaching wise lead the conference and kind of the style and the way play is done. And it's like, there's really no reason why it couldn't be DeVries. You just have to take it with wins and success.
Yeah. I guess we're waiting for the one Kingslayer to come in and take the throne for the sake of the conference. So,
yeah.
But as you say, Mike, a lot of it has to do with recruiting, and this is where the slide kind of points to.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, it's good that we kind of like prefaced all this with the coaching conversation, because all of it really does sort of begin and end with the coach. I mean, even when we talk about recruiting, it's the kids are going to the coach and the system versus necessarily the school, which is only part of it. So, but yeah, like, looking at, and discussing the talent discrepancies between the different conferences. I mean, again, I should note, I don't think the Big Ten's tournament drought is only a talent issue, but I guess it's the one variable that's pretty measurable on paper. So it's, one of the first ones I lead in. And obviously in an odd sort of way, the talent discrepancy is both a cause and a symptom at the same time, which again, we can talk about a little bit more later in the show. So in terms of like straight measurement, the 2 ways I've tried to gauge talent variances in the past were 1, recruit rankings, and 2, just a simple count on the number of future NBA dudes that play on a college roster. And so for this exercise, I pulled some data from the archives that range from 2001, which was the year after Michigan State won the last title for the Big Ten, and leading up to 2024, last year, which is when, the portal is now starting to play some weird games in terms of the noisiness and the numbers for like high school recruiting. So look at the average number of top 80 recruits on the roster of the regular season conference champions from the ACC, Big Ten, Big 12, and SEC to try to demonstrate some of the variance in the numbers. And the reason I chose conference champs is just because it's a pool of teams that's just far greater correlation to actually winning NCAA titles versus the strength of, let's say, like the middle tier of the conference, which, like we talked about before. It doesn't matter that Iowa is slightly better than like the middle of the ACC teams or the Big 12. Yeah, all that really matters is the top 1 or 2 teams in your conference are really going to be the ones that are going to actually have a chance of winning the title. And from the output, the data pretty much speaks for itself. If you look at the first slide we have here, and of course, as Bob says, we'll post this on the show notes. The average number of top 80 recruits on conference champions from 2001 to 2024. The ACC led the way with 6.3 top 80 recruits average on the rosters of their conference champions. Big 12 was second with 5.6, and SEC was right behind them with 5.5. The Big 10 was way down at 3.9. Now, that's a variance that's a little bit difficult to, I guess, reconcile with the fact that you look at like the NCAA title winners over that same time period, with the average is about 6. So you see that the ACC is right there, actually slightly above the average number of top 80 kids on the champion, on their rosters for the conference champions. That matches what the NCAA tournament winner rosters had on their team. And the SEC and the Big 12 are just, right, just slightly below. The Big 10 is way below. It's like 30-40% off the mark of where you're seeing the other conferences. And I think that's just illustrative of some of the problem that the conference kind of faces, what we talked about. Again, there is some randomness to it. There is some timing issues that obviously probably could have allowed at least one, maybe two Big Ten teams in the last 25 years to maybe break through. But I think these numbers at least illustrate the fact of, okay, why isn't the Big Ten just not even close to the ACC? Why it was not expected for them to have, like, let's say 5, 6, 7 championships versus maybe the random 1 or 2. And so, yeah, I think that's a big part of the challenge, is that when you look at the Big Ten's actual performance relative to the numbers of the other conferences and, the ones that are having well below, let's say 5 or 6 top 80 recruits per roster, they're kind of doing what is expected of them. It's not a surprise that they're as far down based upon these numbers.
No, I mean, this chart jumps out at you when you look at that. 6 is the average number of top 80 recruits that wins a title, and the Big Ten's at 3.9, and we're nowhere close to the other conferences. And honestly, what this graph would tell you is the complete opposite of what I was saying earlier, that even though the Big Ten has had a lot of runners up, it would say it's less about, oh man, we're just getting unlucky in the title game. It's more just like the Big Ten is outkicking their coverage more than they should. That honestly, the variance moving forward, if you keep going, is the Big Ten will probably do worse in tournaments. That, like, the variance is them doing as well in getting to the final game with as little talent. So no, this is jarring. And even just when you look at, these are very kind of Big Ten examples I'm pulling out of my head, but it's like, Michigan gets the Fab Five in the 90s. You just get an influx of talent. It's like, boom, back-to-back Final Fours. Like Ohio State gets Greg Oden and Mike Conley. It's like, boom, final game. Like there's examples of you just get a ton of talent and it works. It doesn't always work, but more often than not, it feels like, yeah, you get a bunch of 5 stars and throw them together. And even if the coach is maybe a little bit subpar, like, you'll be able to get it. You'll be able to get there.
Well, but I would also throw out the fact that Big Ten teams execute extremely well. That when you think about Wisconsin and their runs in the middle 2010s, like we were talking about earlier, they're running that swing offense. They're running it a little differently because they had a little more playmaking ability. They had a little more variance in their scoring than it was than they were getting. It was slow still, but it wasn't as slow as it was in years past. I think I think that's part of the equation, is that Big Ten teams are built to execute. It's what Painter works on. It's why Painter's teams are so effective, why Izzo's teams are so effective, why Bo Ryan, Dick Bennett's teams were effective. Those teams ran their stuff extremely well. They were very well connected. But you throw in that additional talent bump, like you're saying, Scott, that you throw that in, it's kind of like watching the Pacers this year.
Right.
That there were teams that were a little more talented than the Pacers in their 1 and 2 options. But because the Pacers had depth on the floor at all times, they were superiorly coached, much like Oklahoma City was in a very similar type of situation there as well. You see that those types of teams can elevate with a good level of talent and can end up winning, or at the very least winning at the highest levels, even though you may not be looking at 5 NBA players like the NCAA winner average, But you look at that 93, those 92, 93 Hoosier teams, you were at that NCAA title winner average with what was on the roster.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right, Bob. I think also what Scott was kind of saying is about like maximization. I mean, you could look at it from that other angles. Like, yeah, I mean, the Big Ten, if you consider maybe some of the deficits they have in their rosters, they are possibly doing better than what could be expected on those earlier points of the tournament. Like, actually getting that many teams to the Final Four or the final game. But yeah, I guess the challenge is, again, that if you look at it just like the component of, let's say, the coach and the roster, if you're constantly facing a Mike Krzyzewski, a Roy Williams,
Right.
a Billy Donovan, a Jay Wright, and you're in the Big Ten and you're going against those guys with less talent consistently, where's your advantage? Is your system that good that, like, okay, I'm gonna beat this Hall of Fame dude who has much more talent than me, just because I'm gonna like run a really unique system against them? And obviously that can happen, but it's just not going to be something that's going to be at level, let's say.
Aren't you Tony Bennett? At that case, aren't you Tony Bennett? Like, that would be the example I would think of from the ACC, that who was going up against, Roy and Krzyzewski and still winning conference titles, getting 1 and 2 seeds.
Yeah.
Bennett was able to find a way to make that work.
Yeah. But you also consider but Bennett did, like, the strange thing about Bennett's numbers is that he actually had a crazy number of like NBA dudes and top 80 dudes. So he's a little bit different players. It's different than Bo Ryan, I guess.
Well,
Ryan, but yeah.
I'll go back to that game we referenced earlier, the Indiana-Kentucky game in 2012. And I think it hits this chart perfectly. Is, we played Kentucky really well, lost 102-90, but that was, I think, the closest game they had that whole run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That Indiana team, you had Cody Zeller and Victor Oladipo, who both played in the NBA. No other player on that team played in the NBA. Like Christian Watford, Verdell Jones, Jordan Holes, Will Sheehy, Elston, Remy Abel, Matt Roth. We'll go back. I mean, the great college basketball players, no NBA players. You look at that Kentucky roster, it's like, all right, they have Anthony Davis, who's the best of all of those. Like, you already have the best player there. You have Michael Gilchrist, you have Marcus Teague, you have Terrence Jones. I mean, Dorian Lamb played a little bit in the NBA. Like, you have 5 guys there who all had, different cups of coffee in the NBA, different levels of playing there. And you wonder, if you take a Terrence Jones type player and just swap him, take the Christian Watford spot from Indiana, take Watford out and put, I think he was like I think Terrence Jones was like the 9th pick of the draft that year. I mean, you take a player, you swap Watford out for a player like that, maybe that Indiana team beats that Kentucky team. And I think that's that's exactly what I think you see in a lot of these matchups is, there's a lot of NBA talent that comes out of the Big Ten. It's like, all right, you got, Draymond Green with Michigan State, but go look at the rest of that team. And then you go look at the teams, the SEC and it's not just the guys you remember, like Anthony Davis. Again, that Kentucky team is a great example, because it's like 5 of the dudes were drafted.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you see the difference.
Yeah.
Right.
And the numbers kind of, you're right, Scott, and the numbers kind of, reveal themselves. On this chart, I mean, the top level, let's say, recruiting for the top teams in the conference is reflective also of the fact that there's just a variance in terms of the number of NBA dudes that are coming out of the conference champions. Like this example I have here, the ACC in the last 23 years, average conference tournament winner, or average regular season conference winners, their rosters had 4.4 pros. Big 12 had 4.1, SEC 4.0, and Big 10 is 2.7. It's almost an exact match, at least directionally, of what we saw with the recruiting variance. And that's what you typically see with when I run these numbers, for just about any conference or any like a period of time. It's that same correlation exists. It's like recruiting leads to a certain number of like dudes that can perform high when they're in college, and then that leads to them, jumping into the pros at a certain level. Yeah. And you can even break it down almost by position as well. I was looking before the show to look at, let's say, just like the point guard position, which is, obviously for the NCAA tournament, that's so often the biggest difference between, some of the winners and losers is which team had like that takeover guard that just, dominated the game, the Kemba Walkers or the Shabazz Napier type dudes. And I was looking in the the regionality of the recruiting. And if you look in the last 20 years, the Midwest region has produced just 41 top 80 point guard recruits. So about 2 a year are coming into the Big Ten. Now, and that's the Big Ten region. That's like Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, Minnesota. That region,
Right.
if you took that as like one unit, compared to the rest of the country, it's very underperforming in terms of producing those kind of dudes. Texas and Georgia, if they were a single state, they would be producing more top end point guards than that whole region over the last 20 years. Just Texas and Georgia. And I don't even get into like the DMV or New York or, Florida. I mean, so Bob and I've talked previously about this idea of the golden crescent of talent distribution, and basketball is unfairly centered around like Massachusetts down the I-95 corridor and then jumps over I-20 into, Atlanta and into Texas. So the issue you have is not just like distribution of like the talent of let's say the individual players, but the position players are not distributed evenly as well. And I said, like, of the 41, say top 80 point guards that have come out in the last 20 years in that Big Ten region, only 15 of them end up playing for Big Ten teams. So the Big Ten's kind of getting waylaid by like a double whammy in terms of not only the area is not producing many of those kind of Kemba Walker, Shabazz Napier types of dudes, but even when they do, 2/3 of the time, they're not going to Big Ten teams. And you're not importing them, and you're not importing them fast enough either.
Back to the history, when I was coaching in Houston in 2000 to 2005, I was stunned. I grew up around here, kind of used to like, all right, this is the cradle of, if you can just recruit Indiana, you're going to win national titles. And you get down there and it's like, man, there's a lot of basketball talent here in Texas. South is like, wow, there's a lot of talent down here. And I think it's just taken some time, but I think the SEC has realized like, oh, let's just keep these dudes. Let's just keep these guys here.
Go get them.
Yeah, go get them.
Go get them. And I think that as we look at kind of what can be done for the tournament winner is go get them. How do you go get them? Who do you go get them? Who can go get them? And that, we talked about negative recruiting, I think, on an episode or two before, where we were discussing what happens when an SEC program recruits directly against a Big Ten program. Do you really want to play in a conference where it's slow pace of play, where it's system reliant, where it's 1950s basketball being put into the 21st century? That sort of mindset of, do you really want to try and play in a system that's not going to translate to the league or translate to European basketball? Do you really, when you're looking at that 18-year-old kid and their family, and you're only going against teams that are going to be beating you, holding on to you, and playing a physical brand of this game, that you're an elite player, why don't you play with the rest of the elite players here in the SEC? That used to be the case with the ACC, but I think more and more that's where you may see where you're seeing the SEC kind of filling in that market a little bit more. But Mike brings up a great point with the, you also just don't have the players in those geographic regions that you had when you were able to recruit the Fab Five or the Flintstones pretty much in your backyard.
Yeah.
Well, you can think about the Eastern
So
Finals.
it's kind of a double whammy.
Yeah. Well, think of the NBA Eastern Finals this year. Who are the 2 point guards?
Yeah.
Jalen Brunson and Tyrese Halliburton. Where are they from? One's from Illinois, one's from Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Where did they play?
Yeah.
Not in the Big Ten.
Not in the Big Ten. Yeah, true. So yeah, I think that's that kind of gives us that next level where we're kind of looking at, you're going to need to have a national presence in recruiting. And if you don't have a national presence, and you better have a way to get incentivize and entice kids to come to your campus, especially in a place if you're leaving the Sun Belt to come to the Midwest.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And again, I look at it like I'm looking at the list of coaches in the Big Ten. Like there's not a name that sticks out to me that's like currently that is well positioned to take this over or has shown an ability to do it. Like Dusty May is probably up there, but it's like very little experience. I obviously think DeVries could do it, but it's like he's got to do it. Underwood has actually done a pretty good job there. But again, we keep going back to like Izzo and Painter, like they are the stalwarts of this conference. They've had the success. I'm not sure that they are best suited to get this done, in the current environment.
They're not. And it should be noted, those guys have designed this conference to be played, and they've designed their teams to win this conference in a way so that they don't have to go and do exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk about why we think Indiana can break that mold when we come back on Next.
Let's go.
Yep, let's do it. Welcome back to X's and Joe's. I'm Mike Wiemuth, joined by Coach Bob Moats and our guest, Scott Caulfield. So, gents, we talked about the conference overall, but this is an IU podcast mostly. So
we're going to get Indiana back to the one shining moment. Like let's bring this thing full circle. Like how can we get Indiana back to 25 plus seconds on one shining moment?
So here's the thing, Scott, like your co-host got the Bison back at IU. So now your project.
Are you up for the challenge?
Back on one shining moment.
Are you up for the challenge? Can you make this happen?
I mean, yeah, we're eight other coaches have failed, and we haven't gotten it done. Coach DeVries, listen to what I'm telling you. Just do it. Start throwing money around.
Yeah. That I think that's kind of the first, but I think that's the first thing you hit. You said the key word, money.
Yeah.
And I think that was the first step in this, where IU jumped out in leadership, what we call NIL, but the player compensation models that. And you and Galen do a great job of this on Crimson Cast of going over how this works, why IU is well situated, and also how, even with the evolution of this, that we've seen kind of a weird bumper year. We've seen market equilibrium hit the sort of player compensation marketplace now. So the question is, IU, if they can continue to raise the amount of money that they're putting into player compensation, not just through the Big Ten media deal, but also through NIL offers and through Hoosiers Connect. I mean, we're pretty much situated to be able the program situated to be able to make some waves in this area. I would think
it feels
they're not going to be outbid.
It feels like we are well positioned for a time when there's change. When every other time, and we did this on Crimson Cast a couple months ago, but just kind of talking about there's been these evolutionary changes in college basketball, but I'm not going to go through all of them, but like one of the biggest ones to me is that 90 to 92 era, right when the Fab Five comes in. It's like that's the end of kind of the 80s era of like, oh, basketball's cute, and we can take a song and throw it on there and do whatever. It's like there's money, there's AAU. Suddenly your shoe contract really matters in recruiting, and Indiana was just caught flat-footed, no pun intended. Unfortunately, because they were kind of stuck in kind of the Michigan State spot too, where like what Michigan State has now, it's like we had a coach who was a legend who didn't believe in the change or didn't want to believe in the change and almost fought against it. It's like, hey, we're going to go LA Gear as our shoe contract for a year. We'll go Converse, and we were just off the rails, and we let it pass by us. Like that whole era kind of got lost in that mid 90s section where Knight was like, no, I don't believe in AAU. I don't believe in shoe deals. There's a world where if Knight's like, all right, I'll go with Nike. Again, that wouldn't happen because like just if you knew Bob Knight, it wasn't going to happen. But there's a world where it's like, I'll go with Nike and everything changes. There's a change happening now that's to me as similarly seismic as what happened then. But it feels like everything is actually conspiring to help Indiana out. We have a new coach. We have, I think the Signetti and football stuff just cannot be not mentioned at this point, that having a functional football program and an administration that seems to understand how important athletics is as a marketing tool for the university is huge. And you have, in a weird way, it's almost like, the blessing in disguise, having 20 years of kind of just being mid in basketball, you have this alumni base that is ready to give, and they're ready to donate, and they kind of spent back for a little bit. You also have a donor base that for years, because of Knight, we were taught that, all right, Kentucky does it the wrong way. We got to do it the right way. But there wasn't, outside of giving to the university, there wasn't an outlet for people who wanted to kind of play loose with the rules to use their money. Kentucky's been doing that for years, but now it's like, all right, now we know how to do this. It's all legal. And now you can kind of open the spigot of dollars that Indiana really couldn't do before, the Ricky Rowe kind of stuff from Blue Chips, like buying crackers and stuff. And, now you look up, it's like, hey, who's got the 4th largest alumni base in the country? It's Indiana. Like tons of money, tons of interest there, and they've been kind of neglected, and now you can re-engage them. So I think Indiana is very, very well positioned for this right now. And everything we've talked about, it does feel like there's kind of a void in the Big Ten for a team that can come in on the basketball side and say, hey, here's how we're going to do this, in a new and effective way. In a weird way, we're kind of doing it in football already. I mean, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, like they have the battleship, historical, inertia going on their side. But in football, we're kind of looking at this differently, and we're changing the mold, and we're having success. I don't see why we can't do that in basketball. And we've shown we can put the money behind basketball as well. So I think everything is aligned for it to happen. Whether it happens is like, can it execute? Can it be done? Are the right people in place? But it does feel like everything is lined up for this to be a good era for IU basketball.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy, Scott. If you think back, like how often the conversation around IU is, well, IU has this history. They have this fan base support. They have all these advantages, but why can't that actually result in anything? And I think you're right. It is a bit like the dam has been holding the water back for so long because of the rules, as they were set. There was just not that much of a direct advantage of having a big, enthusiastic fan base outside of the advantage of just having a big crowd while your recruits are showing up at the game, or just having a little bit more money coming in. Now it's very direct. And you're right. I think now a team and a program like Indiana that has like that crazy fan support, now it's going to have a much, much bigger impact on the things that we've been talking about, like recruiting and just everything else that kind of drives you towards a championship. So I think you're right. I think it is sort of like a possible watershed moment with all the changes taking place in college basketball for a new coach to come in and sort of turn things around.
I'd also add, we've been off cycle on some of the changes. Like Scott, you mentioned the shoe deals back going in the 90s, and the shoe deals were followed by the facilities, the massive facility upgrades. We missed all that. And it was, well, now that's the reason we can't get top level recruits, because our facilities look like it's something with shag carpeting and wood paneling. It looks like grandma's basement. We're not really, we're living in the past here. Well, now all these places that have kind of gone with these 8-digit types of athletic facilities with weight rooms and spa type looks to them, who are now handing player compensation packages that don't look that good. A kid walks in and sees all these bells and whistles and goes, I can buy my own elliptical. I don't need yours. So why don't you give me money to buy my elliptical versus me having to work out here? Or I can buy my own video game system. My teammates can come to the apartment, sort of thing, or the condo I'm going to buy with the money that you're paying me. Indiana now is kind of off cycle on that. Now it can be on cycle to lead the charge, because the facilities are good enough. The facilities are fine. Everything around it is fine. And now you can focus on, when you're redoing facilities as the boomers are matriculating out of society, our generation and the millennials are taking over season ticket packages, donor bases are changing. The sorts of fan experiences that people want are different today. IU is now positioned, because we kind of waited a little while, not necessarily by choice. Now you can kind of just be the lead in this, the changing in the marketplace, to be able to be able to really just become the elite programs you've always needed to have here. So I think that if not now, then when is sort of the question. Like the iron is hot, you got to strike it. I don't know. I think at this point, Indiana's in a pretty good position. And I think, you mentioned, are the people in place? The DeVries hire was a good hire, we think, looking at the board. Compared to Buzz Williams, I mean, I'll take Darren DeVries every day and twice on Sunday. I think we got a better deal than Maryland got. Curt Cignetti has shown, at least in 1 year, that he was definitively the best football hire IU's had since Bill Mallory. So in this situation, I think we have something in Scott Dolson who's seen every mistake that Indiana University's made since one shining moment. He was on the bench, right? He was a manager on the bench with that team. He's got an 87 championship ring. So he's seen every mistake this department's made. So you've got people in place that can kind of make the right decisions. We'll see where this leads, but I feel pretty optimistic about it going into football season this year.
Well, and also you just look around the board, you look at the Big Ten, it feels like Indiana's one of the teams that is really well positioned in this NIL era. Like, I know there were some rumors, first year Dusty May was having trouble getting the NIL dollars he wanted to build the roster he wanted. It's like that was odd. And again, I keep hitting on Michigan State, but like they're the lead in the Big Ten. Izzo is just not going for all of the things that is happening right now. He doesn't like the transfers. No. He doesn't like the portal. I don't know what their NIL procedure is, but it doesn't feel like he's going to be as forward thinking with NIL for students. And they're going to have a regime change at some point. And you have a lot of other new coaches, but a couple years ago, Minnesota was like, hey, we had, $500,000 for our entire team on NIL. It's like, guys, that's not good. Like, that's not something you should be promoting. No. It feels like a lot of and I think Ohio State has it pretty well figured out, but I think they're focused on football. Like, and Indiana is unique in that I think they're going to be able to try and focus on both for a while. And I think they have the donor base that is willing to give to both, because for football, it's like, this is new and exciting and I'm happy to give to it. With basketball, it's like, I want this to be good again. You have a nice push and pull, and it does feel like Mike said, it's like the dam could just be opened up, and it feels like it might just be like us in Oregon, who really are able to play in this NIL space correctly in college basketball, if it's done right. And I just keep saying that it's nothing against DeVries. Everything I've heard so far is awesome, but it's like, I got to see a game. I got to see how this team coalesces. I want to see how we go through, 2 years of building rosters. But I will say, I have faith. Dolson made the Cignetti hire. And so that gets you a lot of clout. And, he then went, and it seemed like he used a similar process to get DeVries. And so I have faith in that process, because it yielded maybe one of the best coaching hires we've had at IU since Bob Knight in Curt Cignetti. And again, I just don't think, the amount of enthusiasm with IU football and the amount of money that's coming into the university because of IU football with the sellouts and all of those. It's like, yes, Ohio State and Michigan traditionally do better, but they've already done better. So they've already budgeted to spend that money. For Indiana, this is all found money. It's like all we're in the couch, you're just getting all this extra stuff. And so we're really being supercharged, unlike any other school in the Big Ten. And honestly, if we start getting basketball going, that becomes like found money too. It's like, again, the blessing of kind of being just mid for 20 years.
Agreed. So, well, Scott, it's definitely been a pleasure having you on the show. It's a lot of fun. It has been, we love it when we can kind of invite more people into the table at Denny's, as we like to say, and go to about 3 a.m. Perky the waitress we were on first name basis with her back in the era we were there. So that being said, thanks again for coming on. But I want to also give a special thanks to Bob Thompson for the sound and music you hear on the show, and John Ringer of Ring Design for the look and feel of the show that you see. And special thanks to William McDermott, our producer, who helps make us look as good as we possibly can look. Yeah.
And looking forward, episode 37, recruiting in-state versus recruiting nationally. Which avenue produces the most competitive results for a program on the national stage? I think this one will probably dovetail pretty well with what we've just been talking
Yeah,
about.
I think we set up the next episode pretty well here. It's we're in the story arc here of Who Shot JR.
Exactly.
Cliffhanger.
Yeah, exactly. That'll be part 2 of this one.
Part 2.
Yeah, you can come back if you want, Scott, but we'll take it from there. But
okay.
Yeah, the
conversation.
Yeah, but yeah, we'll shoot to have that one probably out next 2 weeks. I think we're probably going to try to squeeze a football preview in before the start of the season. But yeah, so look for the recruiting one to come out next week or two. So until then, this Endless Conversation was brought to you by the Back Home Network. Be sure to check out all the great BHN content, including the Assembly Call, Doing the Work, the Dribble Drive, Crimson Cast, and our 2 newest titles, Sideline Stories and Football Weather. You can find that on YouTube and at backhomenetwork.com. So until next time, I'm Mike Wiemuth.
I'm Bob Moats.
Take care, everybody.